Hello, and welcome to another volume of my collection of favorite CDs. I know I recently did one the other day, and this is the second part of the volume, so bear with me. This album is a 1979 release by Bob James called Lucky Seven. One of the greatest things to me about Bob James are the album covers. Some may find them a little bit corny, but I love this particular one. For those of you not in the know, Bob James did the theme song for Taxi. A lot of folks might call it he makes smooth jazz, but it's actually quite a lot grittier in a lot of ways. Kind of stripped down. This album features a ladybug on the cover. I call it the Ladybug album. Some of his albums have usually very small objects like coins, his Heads album, and a hot dog, and his next album, H. And there you have it. Now, in terms of the American market, this album has now been reissued. This is Marcus Miller's 1984 album, also called Marcus Miller. This man wrote and played bass with Miles Davis and Luther Vandross and a whole bunch of other people. This kind of sounds like a Kashif. I don't know if you remember Kashif. Or a Rick James album, or Michael Jackson, or even Luther Vandross. Very mid-'80s, you call it boogie funk, actually. A lot of dance rhythms. It's a good album, not very jazzy. This is actually, I believe, a Russian version of an album that's domestically in print. It's actually one of my favorite solo albums of Marcus Miller. I don't mind his singing too much. A lot of people aren't that into it, but this album is actually a very, key part of my collection. It's an original CD, as you can see from the bottom cover. Digitally remastered analog recording. This is Matthew Wilder's 1983 album, I Don't Speak the Language. And I don't know how many of you know Matthew Wilder from his one hit, and I'll sing a section of it for you. Ain't nothing gonna break my stride. You know that song, right? Well, that's on this. But this man, I will tell you, is probably the equivalent of a Paul McCartney or a Paul Simon of the new wave dance synth pop era. His songwriting's terrific. There is not a bad song on this album, and it's very reggae influenced. Reminds me of a lighter weight kind of Police record, but it's a great pop R&B reggae recording by an artist that I think should not be known as a one-hit wonder. Excellent music. Now this is Evelyn Champagne King. Speaking of Kashif, he produced this album, 1982. It's called Get Loose. The big hit on this album is Love Come Down. This is more of that kind of boogie funk we talked about before. It's been reissued a lot since, but this is actually the version of the album that I have. You can see it has a white jewel case insert, and if you open up the CD, you'll see that's exactly the case. I think that's the way it was issued, I'm not sure. This is the Kenny Loggins album, Celebrate Me Home. Now, the reason I have this in my collection is not just because it was produced by Bob James, but because I don't think Kenny Loggins ever recorded another album quite like it. It's very heavy on the Philly soul influence as much as his singer-songwriter ones. Celebrate Me Home, of course, is a great soulful kind of Christmas song, I guess. And there's another song on here that I really like called I've Got the Melody Deep in My Heart, which is a up-tempo Philly kind of romp with Patty Austin. Wonderful album overall. Now this is bass player Stanley Clarke's 1978 album Modern Man. Again, an album unlike a lot of things that Stanley ever made. Now, this record is very orchestrated, and the title cut and the song called Gotta Find My Own Place have a lot of very surprising, melodic, almost Stevie Wonder-like chord twists to them. Stanley Clarke has never been much of a singer, but he's actually all right on this album. I love it. This is a twofer of albums by Edgar Winter. Now, you're not going to find a lot of songs like Frankenstein or, Free Ride on these. Jasmine Night Dreams, for all intents and purposes, is his kind kind of Stevie Wonder jazz funk album. Follow up to Entrance, as it were. There's some rock and roll songs on it, but there's a song called Little Brother on there, which I love, and a very jazzy song called All Out, which features some great electric piano playing, and a couple of kind of pop soul flavored songs called, I've Always Wanted You and How Do You Like Your Love. This album is one of the last albums of the Edgar Winter Group with Dan Hartman and Rick Derringer. Good album as well. Funky, rocky in some places. Worth checking out. This is another Stanley Clarke album, a live collection from 1979, released on CD in '94. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but this is actually an abridged version of a much, much, much longer album. Some of the cuts had been taken off of it, and there was enough length on the CD to put them on, but for some reason they were omitted. But this song contains some great versions of his songs like Rock and Roll Jelly, and a song with his partner George Duke, Just a Feeling, which is presented on here as a tribute to Louis Armstrong, kind of a funky, modern-day New Orleans kind of thing. And a song called, I think it's called Together Again, a tune where he plays all the instruments. It's got a nice little pop rock melody to it that I like. This is a Les McCann album called Layers. This was recorded around the same time Stevie Wonder was making his albums Talking Book. Almost sounds like an instrumental version of those albums. A lot of layered synthesizers and a really unique production. This is probably an example of how musically potent the funk genre is. I mean, a lot of people think of it as party music. This is actually a very serious musical release, and you'll find it in your jazz category of your music store, as you'll find a lot of great music. But this shows you that funk is definitely not a joke. You'll listen to this and you may say, "Oh, it's jazz, it's funk." Trust me, it just takes it a little more seriously. That's all. This is Donald Fagen's album, The Nightfly. I'm sure this is in a lot of people's favorite album collections. IGY, Green Flower Street. If you went to your average grocery store in the 1990s, they would put this album on and play it on a loop. A lot of people think of this as almost instant music, but I'll tell you, it's Steely Dan. Basically, nobody sounds like it. You know these songs very well, and it's so musically wonderful. I just have it in my collection. You search any of the songs from Donald Fagen's Nightfly on YouTube, which I encourage you to do, you will know them. This is probably, if not the, one of the most rarest album in my collection. I picked it up in Montreal. It's Rufus seal in red. One type of seal on the front, another type of seal on the back. Chaka Khan had left Rufus by this point, leaving the keyboardist David Hawk Walensky to do lead vocals. He does a good job, and it's kind of another one of those boogie funk albums like I was talking about. Pretty good stuff. Now, this is an example of me having a bit of a soft spot for the underdog, but I gotta say. Chicago recorded this album in 1979. Their second with Donnie Daskus, who replaced the late Terry Kapp on guitar. But Peter Cetera is still in it, Robert Lamb. It's got a great song on it called Street Player. It's a very, funky, rhythmic album with songs like Take Me to the Paradise, Window Dreaming, I quite like, and Life is What It Is. Some great highlights from this album. Really, really shouldn't be missed. This is great Chicago, and I think a lot of people give this album flack because, well, it comes from the disco era, and, what else would be new? Anyway, enjoy this, and check out some of this music. It may not be as popular as some of what you might hear in music magazines or in the press, but it's definitely worth checking out. So enjoy yourself and enjoy the music. See you next time.